talk to your kid. Don't sit down at the dining room table and say, "Now we're going to have a talk."
Youth that do gamble are 6 times more likely to develop an addiction as an adult.
You have this certain mentality, never my kid.
They shouldn't feel isolated for making a healthy choice.
For a safe, healthy, and drug-free community.
Watch Step Up to Save Our Children today.
Hello, and welcome to Step Up to Save Our Children. In this episode, College Bound, Clear Minds, Bright Futures, it's dedicated to helping students start strong, stay sharp on their college journey. I'm Denise Mayer, and today we're diving into something that doesn't often make the campus tours, substance misuse. College is a time for growth, new experiences, and challenges, and it can also bring pressure, stress, and temptation to young students. In this episode, we'll explore how to help your teen make informed choices, manage stress in healthy ways, and build a future that they can be proud of and that you can be proud of, free from the harm of substance misuse. Because staying clear-headed isn't just about avoiding risk. It's about protecting their potential and ultimately the rest of their lives. So today, my guest is Rebecca Young. And Rebecca is with Miami University in Oxford, and she is the director of the Office of Student Wellness. Rebecca Baudry Young joined Miami University staff in 2010 as the director for the Office of Student Wellness. Rebecca provides leadership and expertise to Miami University's strategic plan to address high-risk alcohol behaviors and sexual assault prevention. Rebecca supervises the development and implementation of bystander education, peer education, programming, mental health promotion, risk reduction, and prevention strategies for sexual assault and high-risk alcohol behaviors, and professional development for campus partners. She also serves as a liaison for Miami University to the city of Oxford and sits on the leadership team for the Coalition for a Healthy Community, Oxford area, to develop environmental strategies that enhance a culture of care, concern, and inclusion. Rebecca received her graduate degree in health promotion and education from the University of Cincinnati. She previously worked for the Ohio Resource Network to provide support to statewide initiatives addressing alcohol and other drug prevention and safe and supportive learning environments. So welcome to Rebecca Young. We are so privileged to have you on today.
Oh, thank you so much for the invitation to join you. I'm excited about your podcast. I like this very much. So thank you.
Thank you very much. We have started this, as you well know, it's hard to get parents to come to different things because they're so busy. So we just decided this was a good way for them to be able to get on, get off, do something, pick up their child, whatever. But listen, because I'm not sure, we were just discussing this on one of my coalition meetings. This might be the only opportunity for them to hear someone that can really, a professional that can really discuss what's happening as they send their little darlings off, particularly the freshmen, from graduating high school onto the big time. And most parents are nervous about that anyway. So let's just kind of peel this onion and let's start talking about it. So,
for sure.
Yeah.
So for our parents who have children that will be graduating high school, pretty much as of today, right, you will be having some hard conversations, and that's a good thing for our students who are trying to figure out what that next step is after high school. They feel a lot of pressure. And you probably already been dealing with some increases in anxiety or just some stress about making that decision. And then over the summer before school starts and you're getting ready to send them off, you're going to be buying books and buying a laptop and buying all the things to decorate their dorm room and getting that all ready. And I just like to remind parents that to also, while you're doing that preparation, to also prepare them for college environments. And different schools do that in different ways to help support parents and the students. So I can speak to how Miami does that, but every school is different. But right away, when a student says that they want to come to Miami, and they're a high school senior, that summer before they come, they're already given 2 assignments, and they are required to take online education around reducing harms with alcohol use and how to prevent sexual assault.
That's
So
awesome.
yeah, our institution really believes in communicating our values, and we want our community here on campus to be safe, be healthy. And we also want to prepare our students to be active citizens. And it starts now in college, right? They're citizens of our community here at the university. And so having them prepared with that information is important, because the party environment is much different in high school than it is in college. The amount of access and availability to substances is going to be very different than in high school. And most students make really good choices. And so making
That's
sure
the
that
good
you,
news.
that is the good news. That is the
The
good
good news
news.
that we don't really ever hear that much about, because we're also focused on the ones who don't make very good choices, that the majority will remain substance free and will make good choices. And, yeah, I think that's important.
It really is. And I would say for those parents that may have attended college themselves, the college experience is very different. It has really changed. Some in really great ways, and some in ways that just are a reflection of society. So in the last 30 years, almost 35 years now, we have seen a downward trend of high school seniors coming to college with experience drinking. So fewer and fewer seniors are drinking alcohol than we've seen in the last 30 years. So your college experience may have been one in which you were already experienced in drinking. And so you came into this environment with, a little bit of know-how and, anticipating what the reaction will be when you start to consume alcohol or other substances. These students are more naive, and they're a novice in substance use. So that's a really critical piece to remember. Even if your child themselves have already had some experiences with alcohol or other substances, they may not have had as many experiences as 20, 30 years ago, which
And I
would
think,
put,
yeah. And I
yeah,
think what you're trying to say, sort of in some ways,
yeah,
what I'm hearing is that, in some ways, if they have been substance free in high school, the myth is that if you start letting your kids drink at home, and you, as I always say, what you permit, you promote.
mhm,
And then, you think, well, then they're going to be more prepared for college. But what the actual statistics that I read were that kids that do that at home, or are allowed to do that, and are drinking a lot, tend to end up being the binge drinkers, because they're
yes,
like on steroids, gonna like, woo, we're gonna just go for it.
yep.
But the ones that have never done it, and probably are going to be tempted to do it, um, yeah, that's scary too. It's all scary.
It's all scary. It is. And that's the nature of this developmental period, right? Is there's going to be some risk taking, there's going to be some mistakes, and there's going to be a lot of growing and learning, and that all goes hand in hand. As far as parenting styles, a lot of our research has shown either extreme can have a negative outcome.
Right.
So those parents that, take the keys from everybody and let them drink in the basement, right? First of all, that's illegal. Right. And then secondly, those students tend to have more negative outcomes when they come to college around their substance use, alcohol use. And those parents that are extremely strict and are very punitive in their approach around substances and alcohol, their children often also will have negative outcomes from substance use. It's that middle of the road parent that says, listen, this is not allowed. This is our expectation. But I'm here for you if you get into trouble. So don't be afraid to call me. That's usually the style that has the best outcomes for students in college. And so making sure that you're even having these conversations now, what is your expectation of their behavior when they go to
Right.
school? What questions do they have around alcohol or substances? Sometimes I do this with my own kids. When they were in high school, we had like little codes, right? Like if you're in a situation and you weren't comfortable, you can text me or call me and hang up. And then that's my code to call you and say,
I'm coming to get you.
you have to, yeah. But we make something up, right? Like, oh, we have a family emergency. Grandma went to the hospital. I have to come pick you up. Or your sister got sick and I need you home. Like whatever it is, we just come up with a story that saves her from any embarrassment in front of other people to say, I'm not comfortable at a party where alcohol is. She can kind of gracefully exit, and we both know that she's going to be safe now because we got her out of that situation. That is just one thing, but she knows my expectation. My expectation is no drinking until you're 21.
One of the things that kind of jumps out to me with a college freshman versus even a senior in high school, even though that's a year different for the most part, is that in high school, you've established yourself one way or the other. I mean, you have not only your family there for support, hopefully, but you have friends and just really an environment that you feel hopefully somewhat safe in. But now you go to college and you are thrown in with kids that you don't know, that have come from all kinds of places across the United States, even maybe foreign countries, and you're placed into a dormitory and you're just trying to connect. And to me, that seems like the biggest recipe for a tragedy when you're trying to make connections and it's not probably the right thing to do to go to this party or whatever, but you don't want to turn anybody down because you were trying to make friends.
Yeah. So you're absolutely right. The social connection is usually paramount to anything else on that first week of school, especially. So we have a move in where, everybody loads up and gets into their room, and that's the big goodbye, to their parents. Yeah. And then they immediately want to know who they're going to be friends with. Right. And it's this desperation almost of, I need to find my people. I need to find my friends. I don't want to be alone. Who wants to be alone? Right. And so totally get that. And in response to that, and again, I can only speak to Miami, but we have a whole weekend of events after they move in that starts right after move in. So that afternoon and evening, we hit them with activities. We have activities all weekend long. And then we have what we call the first 50 days. And the first 50 days of school, we have something going on every day, so that many things going on every day, so that they do have some opportunities to go to events where alcohol and substances won't be present. But a lot of other students will be, so that they can find friends, right? Find someone who has a similar interest as they do. And then once they start going to their classes too, they'll find, some folks that have the same major, or they're just in the same class together, and they start to make those friends. But that first couple of weeks is really hard because they're
homesick
with, et cetera.
And they get homesick too.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Homesick is so
different.
Normal.
And now I'm on my own. I mean, I have to get myself up. My mom's not there yelling.
Yes.
So
yep.
Yeah, I think it can be kind of overwhelming. And we've had 2 grandchildren now go to college, or one's now finished, both at Miami, and the other one is there now as a junior. And but my kids went to different schools too, colleges. And I just remember the first week, like you said, was a little traumatic for them, a little bit of tears and that type of thing. But once they can kind of get their people, like you said, and start branching out. And even though you start as a mom to feel better that they're making connections and that kind of thing, then your next step is worrying what connections they're making.
Yes.
Like, where are these people from, and what's their value system? And, and it's a tough one. And I think with these substances that are out there now, I want to talk about that, how frightening some of this stuff is. So, let's talk a little bit about some of the risky behavior that can come along with this. And let's start with just, the drinking, because at Miami, is it most of the colleges, there is a bar, a place where they can go and maybe not be served legally, but a lot of them come with, fake IDs that no one can tell well, basically no one can tell. And, then they start with, that's the social place. It is in Miami. I know. I don't know about everywhere else, but there's lots of them, but
Yeah.
Miami's a smaller town. So there's only one really big that I know of, big bar there. And I'm not
Yes.
naming it, but where all the kids go and hang out and, with that, if they can get in without an ID, I think, but they just can't be served without that. Is that right?
So you can be 18 to get into the bars, but you need to be 21 to be served, obviously. And fake IDs are huge. I think, people who maybe aren't exposed to this work as often as like I am, or my colleagues, I think would be shocked at how easy it is to get a fake ID.
Oh, well, online.
And how incredibly accurate they are. And so you do have to feel for those that work in these establishments because they are indistinguishable and they're from all 50 states or another country. So, it's not just, like a high school. Everybody typically has a driver's license from that same school or from that same state, right? Because they all go to high school together. They're residents, but in college you have people from all over. And so distinguish between Hawaii and Idaho and, it's really difficult.
So one of the things that I know when our kids went away to school that we were nervous wrecks about, because, well, it doesn't matter if they're boys or girls. It doesn't really matter. Ours happen to be girls. But even if they're not drinking an alcoholic beverage at a bar, they can still be roofied, with something put in their drink. And so we went over all that. So address that for a second, if you do that there.
Absolutely. So there is education on campus, about sexual assault prevention. And most of that education has to do with setting boundaries and communication, consent. It really is about making those decisions before entering into situations or relationships. Recognizing that not everyone who wants to have a sexual encounter is going to be in a relationship with that person. But what we do know is that overwhelmingly college students, if they are assaulted, it is almost always someone they know. It is rarely a stranger that jumps out of the bushes. It's their friend. It's their friend's friend. It's their roommate's boyfriend. It's someone that they are already kind of hanging out in their circles. And so we try to educate them about that because the myth is don't walk alone because someone's going to, jump out and grab you and you'll be raped. And that hardly ever happens. It's just so rare. It is much more common that one or both people are intoxicated and are unable to give consent, and that they know each other. So that's the most common scenario. We did hear in the fall, actually, this past fall, a couple students that raised some concerns about Rohypnol or roofies. And we already have a committee set up that the institution has with the city. And so every other week, this group of folks come together, and it includes the police chiefs from both police departments, Miami and Oxford. It includes some city personnel as well as Miami personnel. And so we talked to the hospital in town and the police chief in town. And the hospital agreed that when students came to the ER, that they would get consent for talk screens, and then they would look for Rohypnol. The Oxford police, they also entered into a commitment with us that no matter what kind of substances that they were confiscating, they would test to see if they came across any date rape drugs. And so what we found was there were no positive talk screens at the ER, and there was no confiscated drugs or any of those drugs really in our local supply of what was common. What we found out was most students were uneducated about what a blackout is. And so what was really kind of happening, and this is no way victim blaming or anything like that. It is just inexperience of understanding how alcohol affects the body. And so what had been happening is those folks also had blood alcohol levels that would indicate they probably had blacked out. And so blacking out causes you to lose memory, right? You don't store memories while you're in the blackout state, but you could be up and moving and walking around and laughing and dancing and having all the things. But you're not able to retain those memories. And so the next day you have a period of time in which you can't remember. And so some of our students then assumed that that meant something had been slipped into a drink or something. But we couldn't find any evidence of that.
Gotcha.
So it is
And that's
important.
scary. That's so scary in itself that you just can't remember where did I go? I mean, now that an elderly can't remember stuff, that's different. But you're in college, you should be able to remember where you were and what happened.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And there's blackout and there's brownout. So brownout is kind of the stages before you would get to a blackout where you might remember bits and pieces. And so, yeah, I know I was there, but maybe I don't remember going to the bathroom with my friends, but I do remember dancing later, which mimics trauma, right? And so when we
absolutely.
experience trauma and when we are processing our trauma, we may jumble up the timeline of how the trauma occurred. We might remember bits and pieces of the trauma. And so it's really hard to distinguish, like, you know, was I traumatized and assaulted in some way? And this is, you know, my brain's way of processing.
Right.
Or did I drink or combine drugs with drinks that created this brownout or blackout state that I just didn't know that was what I was experiencing. And we talk a lot about polysubstance use because that's where students usually get into trouble. So they may say, when I drink this much, I typically feel this way. And if I use cannabis products, I typically feel this way. But when you mix, it's more unpredictable, right? And so it could be cocaine and alcohol. It could be some stimulants, Adderall and alcohol. Whatever it is, when you mix them, it becomes unpredictable from use to use, right? On Monday, you felt this way, and on Friday, you can feel that way. And so students, I think, often underestimate how much they're going to react or experience from the experiences they'll have from the substances that they want to take.
Well, and a lot depends too on where their mental state and their physical state when they're
Absolutely.
doing that. You know, as far as like, you know, they haven't eaten properly for a couple days or a day and a half, something like that, or they're overly tired. They stayed up 2 nights in a row for an exam. All of those things are factors, I'm sure. It's just how that they react to whatever it is they're doing.
Absolutely. The other thing that we talk about with our students, and this is really important for those that might be seniors coming in as freshmen, is situational tolerance. So situational tolerance is when you have some environmental cues that you're about to go and drink or take a substance. So it might be your routine before going out for the night is you and your friends get together, you do your hair and makeup together, or you wash the cars together, whatever it is. And I have 3 daughters as well. So I kind of always take that perspective and I have to remember our young
3
men.
daughters too, so I get that. Yeah.
And, you know, they're getting ready, they're gelling their hair, all the things. And then after that, they always go through a drive-through and get some food. And then they always go to the party. Well, if that's the routine that you have before you are going to have a night of drinking or taking a substance, your body, particularly with alcohol, will prepare itself for alcohol consumption and will start to release the enzyme that helps break down alcohol. So even though you haven't even had a drop yet, your body knows you're about to do that because of these environmental cues. So
Wow.
when they are used to doing that with their friends in high school,
Right.
and then they come to college, the environment's different. They don't have those cues. So they are not getting that pre-dose of the enzyme. And so the same amount of alcohol is going to affect them much, in a more exaggerated way,
Mhm.
even though it's the same amount. It's just that they did not have that pre-release of the enzyme. That's really important for spring break. So we usually do that campaign and education in the spring prior to spring break so that they understand when you leave Oxford and you go somewhere else, you need to drink less for a lot of reasons. Safety, you don't know the area, there's going to be strangers and new people you're going to meet, and situational tolerance. So it's a lot to think
It
about.
is.
And
It's
there's
a lot. And yeah. And I mean, it's a lot for parents to talk to their kids about. And as I always say, don't plan on sitting down at the dining room table. Do these little talks here and there, over, and keep reinforcing them that, this is something to be aware of and that type of thing too. It sort of sounds like a little bit, an analogy is, when you have someone that has been addicted to opioids for a long time and they finally get off of them and are in recovery, and they are in recovery for quite a while and then unfortunately fall back, they will start with the same dose that they got off in the beginning, and it's so much that it kills them.
Yeah.
And so it is your body just, reacting to that. And but speaking of opioids, do you see much of that on campus?
So no, and it's also very good. So and I'll talk a little bit about our most popular substances of use.
Definitely.
When someone gets far along in an addiction, particularly with opioids, and if they start to move towards heroin or synthetics, it is uncommon for them to be able to retain student status. Grades usually slip to a place where they no longer can be a university student. They're dismissed from the university because of their academic performance. So if it were to get to that point, it's not common that we see it. That doesn't mean we don't see students that have addictions. We do. And we have a counseling service on campus here for that. But they don't do inpatient, they don't do intensive outpatient. So many times students would also, if they're experiencing some addiction or they get to that point, they'll take a medical leave of absence from the university and get treatment. So it's not too common for us to see opiates. What we do worry about is the contamination of the popular substances with fentanyl or
Right.
okay, now a couple of different things now. Xylazine is another one. And I forget the newest one that I just heard about. It's real popular in Pennsylvania right now, and it'll be here soon.
We can't keep up. It's unbelievable. I mean,
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. And that would be an unintentional
right.
overdose
Right.
and an unintentional consumption of an opiate. So the substances that are most common among our students, alcohol, number one. Number two used to be stimulants like Adderall or Ritalin, but it is quickly becoming cannabis products. And then we would go to stimulants like Adderall and Ritalin, and then cocaine. And pretty much everything else like psychedelics and stuff like that, those are more trendy or fad related. So we might see an uptick here or there based on usually a particular student who has that experience and brings it from, home and
Right.
shares it on campus, Yeah. But typically we can count on alcohol, cannabis, and some kind of stimulant, whether it's pills or cocaine.
The problem with the cannabis now, and I've done plenty of things on this, is the high potency of it now. And the
Mhm.
fact that they can, you always think of smoking it, and even that is so much higher than it ever was, like back in Woodstock days or anything like
Oh,
that.
yeah.
I know, but the fact that it can be synthesized down to become an oil, and the dabs, the cartridges that they're using, all of those things have led and are continue to lead to a lot of mental health issues, psychosis, schizophrenia. and unfortunately suicide when it gets bad enough. And that to me, among this age group, I don't really see that. I mean, it's starting, don't get me wrong, in high school, it for sure is. But the ages of like 18 to 25, that's a big thing. And it's, I know the emergency room here at the local hospital sees a lot of the effects of that. And you can take that oil and put it in almost anything you're eating, or drinking or whatever, or put in somebody else's drink. So, I mean, have you run into that a little bit?
So there's lots of products containing THC that our students like. The oils and the tinctures are not as popular, but the edibles are, the gummies.
The gummies. Yeah.
Those are particularly popular because they're so discreet.
Right.
There's no smell.
No smell.
They're small. They're just like gummies, and so they're transportable. And then the THC beverages, the drinks that have THC.
That's the newer thing. Yeah. All those drinks.
Yeah. And so those are the ones that I think have more popularity, at least on our campus. And every campus has a different culture. And so it's important to talk to the folks at the campus that your student will be attending. Ask them what kinds of substances seem to be most popular. All universities must collect some data on this. So they have it, and they should be telling you about it. And if they aren't, you can go to their website and you can go under their fire and safety reports, and the information will be there too.
That's good to know.
And that's a law. That's a Clery law that they have to have that on their website. So you can always get that information yourself. Sometimes it's nice just to talk to students on the campus when you're on the campus tour, or if you're there for orientation.
I doubt they would tell you, but maybe they would.
I'm surprised at how candid some students can be.
Well, that's
Yes.
good.
Yes.
But on the gummies, this cracks me up because I also do Johnny's Ambassadors, which is all the, marijuana and stuff, all the cannabis out in Colorado. And the funny thing is on a gummy bear, the suggested amount that you're supposed to take would equal the arm of one of those bears. So, I mean, that's hysterical that a student, anybody really, would just take the corner. And since it has to go through your gastrointestinal system for you to feel high, let's eat a whole handful. And then you wonder what in the world happened. Talk about a blackout. You probably wouldn't know what's going on.
Yes. So we recommend that you go low, go slow. And that's with any substances. And I think that's actually a really good point to talk about. In high school, most of the messages your student heard was probably like a just say no, or this is illegal, don't do it.
Right.
Or you're going to be hurt by this, so don't use drugs. College messaging is usually very different. It is harm reduction.
Right.
So it allows that student to make decisions based on their values, and the experiences and the goals that they want to, in college. So whether it's academic goals, or certain experiences they want to have, we try not to judge that. And instead we give them information on how to make their choices a little safer. Right. So with cannabis, we talk very candidly about what the science tells us about the effects on the body, on memory, on academic performance, on physical and competitive performance. And if they choose to use, we want them to reduce their risk as much as possible. And so that's where the go low, go slow. And so we talk a little bit, especially it's the novice users, really. It's the good kids, right? That just have no worldly experience about these things. And so they don't know that it's half a gummy or or the whole bag of gummies or the whole candy bar. And so we want to make sure that they understand go low, go slow. That means the low dosage, and you go slow. It can take 45 minutes to an hour and a half before you even feel any effects from the edibles. So give it some time. That's the go slow part. And honestly, that is a message for any substance.
Absolutely. Right.
So we try to tell them that don't ever use alone. Know what you're using, which is
But
It's a different message. And
it
I
is
think
a different
sometimes
message. That's right. And, it's preparing them for a whole life of making choices.
that's right.
And they have to, now they're taking some more personal responsibility for those choices, not just living at home where their parents are sort of trying to make those choices, which sometimes work, sometimes don't. But one of the things that I really want to talk about too, and I'm sure you talked to the students about this, is the Good Samaritan law. And yes, because I have two stories. One was when my daughter was at Ohio State, and the fraternity next door was having a big party. And I don't know how this young man took some Rohypnol or whatever. Why would you take that? I don't know. But anyway, with the alcohol he was drinking, he passed out. And his friends thought, oh, we'll just put him to bed, because they didn't want to get in trouble and, whatever. Well, they put him to bed and he never woke up. So that's one of them. But my niece was at the University of Dayton. See, there's all these different colleges. And she knew enough. She knew enough to call when somebody had, would stop. I don't know if they'd stopped breathing yet at that point, but they were down for the count. And she knew enough to call 911 and get some help, because she knew that it didn't matter if she'd get in trouble or not, that the rest of the kids, that were going to save a life. But I think a lot of kids, even a lot of parents, don't really understand that.
Absolutely. And so at Miami and many other schools, they will have some kind of Good Samaritan policy, or they may call it an amnesty. There's all kinds of variations of what is covered by these policies. Definitely in Ohio, we have a state law for Good Samaritan that covers the folks that are trying to either provide help or call for help. At Miami, it covers everybody. So it covers the person who's calling for help, and it covers the person who needs the help. That way, there is no barrier in we might get in trouble. And that is the key piece to this policy. It's not a prevention policy. We don't think that this policy is going to keep people from using. We just want to keep people from dying. Right. And so if you call for help, if you call your RA, your residence hall assistant, this is an RA. If you tell a faculty person, if you call the police, Miami is going to understand that what you did was try to save somebody, and will honor that. Right. That means it doesn't go on your permanent judicial record, but you still might have a requirement to engage in some education. And that is just to make sure that everybody's safe, right? We just went, you had a mistake. We're going to help you figure out what you did. And then we're going to give you some tools to make better decisions. And sometimes those better decisions are abstinence. Like I don't think you need to be drinking anymore, right? Or it is, how do you reduce your risk by, eating before you drink, pacing yourself, having non-alcoholic drinks in between. We go through all the little tips. And so that is one thing that we started. And we've had good communication with our city, the city of Oxford, who also has a police department. And so they also kind of embrace a policing style that is much more student driven and student centered. So they understand that students are going to make some mistakes sometimes. They're not there to get them in trouble. They're there to give them help. And so if they call because they're off campus, and they call the Oxford, and the Oxford police show up, they will also say, we're just here to get you some help. We're not here to cite you. And so it's been a really effective partnership with the city and the university. And it's kind of interesting that when you look at the data, what we have seen is that students who do get transported to the ER, those BAC levels have continued to be lower and lower and lower, which means they're getting to the hospital sooner, right? So someone's intervening earlier on in these scenarios, which is fantastic. We love to see that. We've also seen an increase in reports around hazing, which again, you think, oh my gosh, there's so much more hazing. No, what's happening is the students are trusting the system, right? And so they're feeling more comfortable. Hazing has always been around. That's why it exists, right? It's tradition, right? And so, but they're understanding their rights as a student, a rights as a person. They're understanding the policies that they can call and get help. And I think that that's a good sign. So just asking a university, like, well, how many, transports did you have to the hospital, or how many students got in trouble for this? It doesn't give you the full picture.
No.
So I think it's really good to kind of get deeper into those conversations and understand what are they doing that may encourage folks to come forward.
Mm-hmm. And I think too, getting the information out that, kids really can't experiment, really, almost like I'm thinking about like generations before, because the fentanyl has changed the landscape to the
Yes.
point where, no matter what, I mean, they have found fentanyl in the cannabis. They have found it in vapes even. They have definitely found it in the pills, the Adderall, like you said, and
Yeah.
all of those kinds of things, and in cocaine too. So you really can't like think, well, I'm just going to try that, see how that is. I've never done it. You might end up dead. And I think that it's not drug abuse exactly, or misuse. I wouldn't say it's fentanyl poisoning. You're poisoning somebody. And, we could get into the whole thing on fentanyl, but I've done those before. And, I'm aware of the fentanyl. The thing is that, we always say, well, gosh, kids can't even be kids. They can't really. And that has put a change in the whole thing, in my opinion. Would you say?
Absolutely. It has. The response that we've had in the state of Ohio is to make Narcan more available.
Right.
Our Governor DeWine, issued 5 Narcan boxes to any public university that wanted them, and then also gave information if we wanted to order more. So Miami took advantage of that, and we have actually 6 Narcan boxes on our campus, and then we have regional campuses that also have Narcan boxes.
Great. That is so great.
Yes, and we also distribute for personal, like one-on-one. So they can come to the Office of Student Wellness. We have Narcan, we have fentanyl testing strips, and we're able to distribute those to students. We have educational campaigns around it. We've adopted the One Pill Can Kill campaign at the federal level. So we've done some information, and education around that. We've created harm reduction baskets that we give to fraternities if they request them. And they have Narcan and fentanyl testing strips in those baskets as well. So we really are trying to make sure that students understand those risks, and that, even if they had experimented, at, 15, 16 years old, it's different even 2 years later, 3 years later.
Absolutely.
That we're seeing,
it all constantly changes.
Yeah, the
They're
xylazines
just trying to be
tranks.
kids, so.
Yeah.
But one last thing too, I wanted to kind of touch on was the mental health of your students. So, when is it a good idea for parents to intercede or, be concerned about the mental wellness of their son or daughter? Obvious things, if they saw it, were some self-harm and things like that. But sometimes it's just, homesick, depression, or whatever. So, and they say so many of the high school kids are sad. And you just think, oh, I know. I'm going to tell you right now what I think 99% of it is this phone. But aside from that, what would your advice be for parents?
Sure. And it's a real hard needle to thread, because discomfort and some levels of anxiety are very normal, and they have to be uncomfortable to grow. And so it can be difficult sometimes to let your child struggle.
Right.
And sometimes you have to, because this is the time of life when they have to figure out their own coping mechanisms. They have to figure out that discomfort is normal and it's okay. That sometimes sadness and grief is appropriate, and you're not going to like it. And it's something that you have to learn to get through. So it's really that resiliency building.
Yep.
It's when those things become too much. And that's when we want, parents to really intervene. What we typically see as parents intervening too early, calling the counseling center or the dean of students because their child is homesick. Well, we expect them to be homesick. This is their first time being on their own.
Right.
We expect that that's going to be uncomfortable. We expect that they might be sad on the weekend because they're not home with you. And that's okay. And just be supportive and take a step back and let them figure it out. Now, when it gets to the point where, you're becoming concerned, and I think we all have that gut instinct of like, my kid's not okay. Whether it's the fever when they were 3 years old and you're like, no, I think we should go to the ER for this one,
Yep.
or now, sometimes we have that gut instinct of, we went to visit, they've lost a lot of weight, or they've gained a lot of weight. They don't talk about friends. They don't seem to have anybody. They're not showing any more signs of hope. So they're not talking about, I can't wait till I graduate, or, I can't wait till this class is over, or I'm really looking forward to my internship. Those are all statements of hope. It's talking about the future. When those start to go away, I think that's when parents are legitimately concerned and need to call. And who do you call, right? And so there's a couple places where you could call. If the university your child attends has a counseling center, you can call there. You can always call a dean of students. So a dean of students is kind of like a dean of a college or an academic program, except they are in charge of student welfare. And so they might oversee a lot of the legal pieces around health and wellness. And so a dean of students office is a great place to call. Some universities also have offices for families and parents. And they're like, hey, I'm your person. No matter what it is, you contact me and I'll help you find the right person. So you could call that person as well. It should be that no matter who you call at the university with this concern, they'll direct you to the right folks.
Right person. So
you can also call the police to do a well check.
That's serious for sure.
Mm-hmm. And we do have that often.
When you do your, when the freshmen first come in, or even subsequent talks or information presentations or whatever, do you ever tell the students, a few of the things that, like if their roommate seems to be, not doing well, I mean, to the point where it could be serious, what things to look for, and then call?
Yes. So we offer QPR training. It's question, persuade, refer.
Right.
And it's a nationally recognized evidence-based program. And we have peer educators. So these are their classmates, their friends, who are trained to deliver QPR, which is a suicide prevention program. In that program, it goes over the red flags, what to look for. It helps the students have language for how to start the conversation about how are you doing? Right. Are you thinking of hurting yourself? Have thoughts of death? Have you thought about that? And then the next step is to refer. And what that is, why that's particularly important for this age group is because they also are in a time of life where they are trying to take on caregiver roles, whether that's like as a girlfriend or boyfriend or partner, or best friend or roommate or housemate. They are starting to want to try on those caregiver roles. And they often will come and not understand how to best support their friend and what are healthy boundaries with that. And we try to let our students know you're not a therapist, nor should you be. Right?
Yep.
And that your own personal mental health is just as important as your friends. And so how do you create some good boundaries with that and make sure that you're referring your friend in a way that is going to get them to help? And oftentimes that means physically taking them to the counseling center, or physically taking them to the hospital, physically taking them to the police department. Because you don't want them to be alone. And so we go over lots of different situations and scenarios. They do some role playing so they can practice the skills.
That's important.
It is so important.
It is important, right?
A lot of times they want to do something, but they just don't have the language to do it. these are hard conversations. They're hard conversations for
hard.
everybody, right?
Exactly. These are hard, and you don't
Yes.
want to. I mean, their brains are still developing
Yeah.
themselves. So, I mean,
Yeah.
college people think, oh, their brains are totally developed. Oh no, they're not.
No, yeah.
Probably for what they say, men is almost 27 or so, and women 25, and it could be even higher than that depending on the person. So, no. And then if you mix in, the drinking and some other things that really, can actually be so
Yes.
impactful about
Yes.
what you say. So, but I do know that those are all things that have been my concerns with having kids in college. And I know probably our audience with Step Up to Save Our Children, that's got to be a big one. And I know that that this is an important topic. And I know that you guys are doing amazing work up there at Miami. As I'm sure most of the universities, I hope, are doing as well. But it's a broad brush of different kinds of students and backgrounds and so many things that you have to take into account, including cultural things, and yeah, I just think that the job you do is amazing, and people don't really think about it until one of their children is having a problem, and then you're thinking, "Woo, student wellness!" Here we go. So I know. Oh, I'm just thinking, oh my gosh. Well, I think we've covered a lot of it. I'm just trying to rack my brain if there was something else, but um, though getting back to those fentanyl
Wow.
detection strips that you were talking about.
Yes.
Have you found those to be fairly effective or?
So I don't know from personal use, but I do.
I doubt that. Yeah, I doubt.
But from the research suggests that yes, they're very accurate. They're easy to use. We came up with our own instructions. The instructions that come with it are fine, but we wanted to make it more relevant to the college experience.
Sure.
So we tailored our own instructions for the fentanyl testing strips and for Narcan, so that students have a quick way to get the information and a way that seems relevant to their experiences. So that's what we've done with that. Otherwise, yeah, I think that they're effective tools, and they are also super effective awareness tools.
That's where I
Um,
was going with that. They
yes.
just make you stop and think, wow, now in this basket, there's fentanyl testing strips. That's interesting. You know what I mean? The
Yes.
Narcan too for the opioids, but the Narcan, we as our coalition here in Anderson, we were able to get Narcan in all the school nurses' offices. And we have 9 schools, so they all have it. They've all been trained, and because you don't know who it might not be a student, it might be somebody in your office, it could be, you
Right.
just don't know, and
Absolutely.
until you are educated about it, you can't save a life. And I think we're all in the business of wanting to save a life. We don't want. I heard a very discouraging thing one time that somebody said, well, I mean, they're a big drug addict, who cares if they die?
Mm.
I said, oh my, that is horrible, because that means you're just electing to be the person not to give them a second chance or a third chance or whatever the chance is.
Right.
And sometimes it takes quite a few, but they're a human being and you want to bring them back to have those choices to try again. So it's so important to get there early. And I think that's the thing you need to impress always on students or adults or anybody is you only have that real little window to bring them back. And you got to really, take advantage of that right away if you're going to save a life.
That's right.
So the last thing, because I know people are probably talking about it a little bit, but when you touched on hazing, but when there is a hazing incident, no matter where it is, I mean, they happened all over the place. Trust me, I'm old enough to know that. And more recently, you've had a little bit of a bout with
We
that.
did.
Yes, you did. But, I mean, as I said, it's all over the place at different times. But I think that knowing that it can result in some very serious things happening, because really it's a form of bullying. Wouldn't you agree?
That's right. I agree. And we are fortunate in Ohio to have Collins Law, which requires universities to be having these conversations with students and to have policies and procedures in place to tackle hazing, particularly when there is a report of hazing. So I think that gives universities some leverage too, and it has increased the consistency in which those cases are handled. across the board. I don't
Oh,
mean,
really? Across the board. Yeah.
particularly at Miami, but across the board.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And the awareness of, the story of Colin, who was forced to drink and did so to excess, to death. And it was because of a
Right.
hazing
Remember.
incident.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That has really underscored the importance for universities to be strong in how they respond. And it takes a lot to do that, because the students need to feel like they can trust the university to make a complaint about hazing.
Yeah, that's
because
a tough one.
they're essentially saying, I'm not going to be loyal to this brotherhood or this sisterhood that I so much wanted to be part of. And that's hard.
That's
That
hard.
is really hard.
That is really hard.
So you have to first build that trust with the students so that they know that there will be some level of support that they will get. So we do that. And like I said, as you build that trust, sometimes what you see is an increase in reports, because now they're like, oh, the university really cares. The university really will help me.
Right.
So there's that. And then the punitive part is tricky.
Sure.
And here's why. Fraternities and sororities have national organizations, and it's the national organizations that guide the policies and the governance of those chapters, not the university.
Right.
So it's not like they're a student org of the university. They are part of a national organization, and their chapter happens to be at this university.
Right.
And they may not even live on campus. They may have a house in which the national organization pays for.
Sure.
So sometimes our jurisdiction is quite limited in what we can do. But when it rises to that level where the institution has an opportunity to intervene and make decisions about their privilege of being recognized, we do so in a very strong way. And you may have seen that recently.
I have, and I've really applauded, Miami's response to what has happened, because people's lives are at stake.
That's right.
And we get back to the kids want to be a part of something, they want to communicate and have those connections, and then it's at what cost. So I think that's probably, I think it's great. Well, we are coming up on a hard stop. We thought, what were we going to talk about for all this time? We could go for another hour, I'm sure, but that's one like that. But anyway, I can't thank you enough. And I'm so excited for all the, students that are heading off to this college experience, and hopefully, college bound, clear minds, bright futures is where we're at with this. But it's so comforting to know that the university, particularly Miami, that's what we're talking about specifically, is so on top of this, and so doing everything they can to make sure these students are safe. And I so appreciate you being on today, Rebecca. I was so excited when you got that big award at Prevention First. As soon as I saw you, I got to get her on my podcast, because she'd be great.
And you're an award winner too. So
congrats.
And with this podcast, it sounds amazing.
Yeah. Well, I don't know. We're trying. We're really doing the best that we can to try to make, people be able to find us and see, where they could get on and off and pick the topics that they're most interested in. So, well, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And
thanks for having me.
Thank you. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye.
Thank you so much to Rebecca Young of Miami University for this amazing insight into college. Thank you for listening, and thank you. And hopefully that you will listen, subscribe, and like us on YouTube.com. That is our channel, is Step Up to Save Our Children. And you can also see us on LinkedIn, X, Facebook, Instagram. And for a lot of resources, please go to our website, which is www.stepupanderson.org. And all of our podcasts are on there as well, but a lot of other resources that might be of help to you. So if you can subscribe to our channel, that helps us with funding, helps us to be able to get more and more of these things. And we've got some great topics coming up. Thank you.